Hi guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. This is part 2 of our analysis series for Beyond Two Souls. So we are kicking off today with Hunted. So Jack, you recently looked at my playthrough, and one of the things you said is that you really like this chapter. Run me through why that is.
There's quite a lot of reasons. First of all, as you well know, I'm a sucker for a chase sequence. It was the exact same in Detroit Become Human. Strange that I didn't say that for Heavy Rain, but there we go. But yeah, look, I think it was great. It started off on a train. There's cops after you. And I think the cinematography is actually something that really grabbed me in this particular one. I love the opening shot, how I'm guessing it's sort of, you're meant to feel like you're Aiden at this particular point, but like you're in a bird's eye view, then it becomes a side view. And even some of the moments like when when you like first, when you got caught, mate, and you was in like one of the sort of like the little carriage rooms and you had to possess the cop. Even sometimes the camera, like, it would follow him in the corridor, and then at other times it would like pan outside, and you could like see the rain like beating on the windows. It's like little things like that I really love. And even like when shit hit the fan and you were getting chased and you was running through the trees, and it had like this sort of shaky cam thing going on. It felt really kinetic, and it felt like with the music in the background that it was really tense. So I really enjoyed it, and I've got a lot of questions as well. Like, obviously, as people will have seen, obviously you got caught a couple of times, and the game was like desperate for Jodie to try and get away, wasn't it? Like really sort of manufactured. So I am curious as to what happens if you don't get caught, and I almost wonder, would it become more of a bland chapter because you'd wrap things up a lot more quickly? So hopefully you can answer that.
Potentially. So, like, funny enough, I didn't get this. I think I got caught twice, right? I'm pretty sure it was twice I failed in this chapter. There is a trophy called Houdini, which is get caught 3 times and get out of the cops' kind of grasps like 3 times as well. Like kind of like escape the cuffs 3 times in the thing. So you can constantly get caught and then constantly escape, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I think what's fascinating about this chapter is that I failed it a lot, which is funny because like I've been very vocal about how when I played this game back in the day, it was on controller, and I'm still trying to get my brain around mouse and keyboard. But I think it made it quite interesting because when I do these playthroughs on the stream, which I'm currently doing, it's quite a tense experience, lad, because like I don't know if I'm gonna fail it myself. The viewers don't know if I'm gonna fail. So there's a lot of potential jeopardy which could happen during this stream, which is really cool. And it was fun to see as well because I never got caught in that bit before. So it was really interesting to see what happened. Like at one point I think I went in a police van, at one point I was like arrested in a little carriage, and Aiden had to constantly bail me out. But yeah, like one thing I want to say though, lad, is because I did fail a lot, and I think I mainly failed because this is like, we're still early doors in the game, and like we had the whole kind of like CIA sort of scene where it really is a ploy to kind of teaches you like the QTEs and the mechanics, that it's still quite fresh, and then it throws you in the deep end after knowing all that knowledge. That I feel like there were definitely cobwebs, there were definitely me trying to get used to like the combat mechanics, the QTEs, that I failed it a bunch, but within that failure, it really paints this picture that you can't, there's not really jeopardy, is there, mate? Because not only with the style of the fact that it's not chronological, that all the chapters are in jumbled order, at least in the version we're playing, in the original mode, that you almost know that Jodie probably can't die, right? She's not just going to get arrested and we're not going to get just a straight flat out game over, right? So I just wanted to ask you, does that damage the game in your eyes at all?
It does overall, when you look at it from an objective point of view. It didn't necessarily in this chapter though, because I remember you actually got shot in this chapter, didn't you? Like,
yeah,
when
I
you
did.
like when you was wading through the water. And I thought, oh, interesting. Like, obviously she's gonna probably survive this, but I wonder if that has like any sort of bearing later on, But yeah, I think probably it will hurt it in the long run, and that's why I sort of stick to what my little theory is at the minute, that I feel like we're going to get jumbled scenes up to a point, but then surely the game has to then run chronological, even if it's for like the final 4 or 5 scenes, because otherwise how are you going to have a point where the ending is randomly in the middle of the game and then you've got some other segment like later on down the line that doesn't really mean that much? That would just be quite a naff ending to it. So I'm holding out hope. Obviously I'm coming into this knowing that you think that it's the weaker of like the Quantic Dream games, so there is that little bit of sort of trepidation and concern there. But I think as far as this scene goes, I thought it was really good. And I've got to say as well that the QTEs on PC look difficult. Like the bits where like you've got to heal yourself, I imagine it's very easy on controller because you've just got the 2 analog sticks that you could bring together. But for you, mate, like the on-screen instructions and the really having to sort of pay attention to Jodie's body movements in like split-second actions as to move, what way to go. It does look difficult, I gotta say. So I'm not surprised that there are instances, if you're quite fresh to it, that you're messing up.
And like at the start, difficulty-wise, there's no sort of easy, medium, hard, ultra hard. It's, do you play video games often, or I don't play video games? And I was like, well, I do, because we run a channel for it. So I just took the question at face value, and naturally I'm playing the harder version of the game. And like on mouse and keyboard as well, it often translates where I'm just like, yeah, I'm failing a bunch of QTEs as we play. So yeah, no, I do agree, lad. But I completely agree with everything you said at the top. Very cinematic chapter, very enjoyable. Funny enough, I was speaking to a friend who I work with who was like, drops into some of the streams and watches me play, and he said that I've joined in at times, and at one point you're at a party, at one point you're getting chased, at one point it's like horror, and he's like, what is this game? I don't really understand. And I'm like, I've played the whole game a bunch of times, and maybe I don't as well. Like maybe the game does lack that identity. But still, though, I will say that this chapter I really like, and obviously you've only watched me play it, mate, but there is like a fair bit of branching in this. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that can happen, which is kind of displayed with the choice screen at the end. One being is that like, when the train at the start where you're aided, you can kind of wake Jodie up by either knocking her or moving people's belongings. You as Aiden can choose to just sit still and wait for the police to come on board to get her. And it's really, there's a bunch of stuff that can happen, and then like Jodie's got to like find her ID to kind of show the police, and then getting it out her bag, she then throws the bag at the cops and then has to run. There's a bunch of different stuff that can happen. Now, one thing I want to mention to you is that, like the other day I said to you, I failed a major QTE where you're on the motorcycle, which again, side note, really cool. You actually drive a motorcycle. In these choice-based games, you're pretty used to just like hitting some QTEs. I was actively steering, which was really cool. I forgot this was a thing, and I didn't expect it out of a choice-based game. But yeah, there you go. I'm like absolutely steering this motorcycle. But it gets to that scene at the end where you've got to kind of like go over the ramp and like get into them. But like, I failed the QTE, and I will defend myself that QTE did not come on screen for very long, or it was very unclear what I had to do, one of the two. So I failed it, fell off the motorcycle, managed to get away. But what's sad is that I basically didn't unlock the ending scene, which you could have had with this lad. Do you know what happens if you don't fall off the motorcycle?
I don't know, so do tell me.
So yeah, what happens is, lad, if you don't fall off the motorcycle is you get this whole other scene where you basically go into a town and there's SWAT police everywhere. Like on rooftops, you have snipers and stuff. And then you get to be aided, and you get one of those scenes where you get to control what happens while you're taking cover. And there is so much you can do here. You can like take control of a soldier on a roof and make them jump off. You can control like a SWAT driver to crash a car that goes into this gun shop, causing this massive explosion. And the best thing you can do as well is you can control like the driver of the chopper and cause the chopper to explode. So it's this absolutely epic scene, and I'm gutted that I missed out on it, mate, because I would have loved for you to have seen that one. So after this, mate, at some point you've got to go and check out what happens.
Oh, I think I will, yeah, because this so far of all of the ones that I've seen, it was the action heavy one. And I know that obviously in the long game it didn't really feel like, or there was really no jeopardy because Jodie was always going to get away. But it's that sort of that feeling you get, that high stakes, you know. And I feel like if I had come into the game not knowing that Jodie could not get past this point, then I'd have been a little bit more, I'd be even more enthusiastic about it, you know. But still though, certainly favourite chapter that I've seen so far, and 100% will go check it out.
Sure. But with that extra scene, it ends with her going up to that SWAT leader, Clifford, I believe his name is, and says, like, leave me alone, and, like, kind of just walks off like a fucking badass. So, yeah, really cool. But also, it begs the question, mate, and I wonder if you have any theories about this. You've sort of seen very choppy chapters at this stage. Do you have any predictions as to how she's got in this scenario where she's obviously a part of the CIA, but now she's running away from SWAT police? Do you have any theories on like how you can get from A to Z so drastically?
I think it comes back to what I said in part one. I feel like Nathan's involved. And I know that I'm jumping a little bit because I feel like it is quite a nice segue into Imaginary Friend, actually. But I don't know if like Quantic Dream have just got a thing for portraying men as absolute gits in their games. But it's almost like every single bloke that you come across is dodgy in some way. And this Nathan guy, it sort of set him up as like your confidant, this guy that's looking after you. And even in like the prologue chapter, you could interpret it that he's like looking out for you, but it could be that he's hunting you down and that he was actually warning the SWAT team to not go in because he knows what she's capable of. So I've still got my question marks on him. And obviously we're going to go into the condenser in this episode as well, where we sort of learn more about like these sort of like more rogue, bad side entities. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to hang my hat and say it's something to do with him, that he's not going to be a nice guy and he's going to sort of follow the mould of every other bloke in this game.
Griff, the creative director of this game, left to go to Don't Nod Entertainment to write more middle-aged men with receding hairlines to become villains.
Yeah.
It seems to be a theme on this channel. You are not wrong, lad. But yeah, you mentioned it. We'll park Hunted there. Let us know what you guys thought about that chapter. But we are going to move on now to My Imaginary Friend, where we go even further in the past, where we get to explore Jodie's background, really, before she kind of like meets Dawkins and Cole back with her home life. This is our first chance to really kind of like meet Jodie's parents. So, lad, what do you make of her upbringing and the parents?
Well, coming across that, to follow on what I was saying before, Philip doesn't seem like a very nice guy, judging by, how the end of the chapter went, with obviously Jodie potentially, or like very nearly choking or hurting that boy after the sort of snow fight went a bit wrong, and he was about to hit her, so that says a lot about him. As far as the mum goes, I'm less so sure. The one thing I have written down here, though, that doesn't really tell us a lot, is that she did sort of break the 3-second rule. You know how, like, you dropped the cookie on the floor, mate? I swear afterwards, I looked. She then bent down and it looked like she was going to put the cookie, like, straight back in the jar. And I was like, oh, that's disgusting. Like, come on. It was on the floor for a good, 6 seconds there, love. But I'll tell you what, actually, one thing I will say about the parents is that, and I feel like this was confirmed, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's that bit where you can just free roam the house, isn't there? And you're playing as Aiden, and I think you knock the box or something, and then as Jodie, you can then go into this room and look at this photo, and you see this flashback of presumably Philip, and I don't know what the mum's name is, it escapes me, but they're in the hospital. And the impression I got is it looked like that they lost a child. So my theory based off that was that Jodie is actually not, is like their adopted daughter. And then even sort of towards the end of this, and even the little discussion that you see between the parents, it sort of confirms that thinking a little bit. So that's what I was sort of thinking, but honestly, mate, do correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe not if it's potentially a spoiler for later on.
Mate, you are bang on the money, and this is something that I didn't discover on my playthrough, so you wouldn't have actually have known this. I mean, maybe you could have gathered it from that box as you mentioned. But one thing you can do, because at the end of the chapter, I'm skipping ahead, but you do go to bed, and I just kind of played, like only as Jodie, but you can actually choose to morph back to Aiden. And when you do that, you can actually go downstairs and eavesdrop on the parents. And you learn that she is a foster child, that they have adopted her. The mum will be really protective of you, or the foster mum Susan, about how they should protect you, of like how it's not your fault. But Philip, the dad, who I'm gonna back you. What a bellend. He calls you the devil and says you're the devil. So But yeah, it's a really interesting chapter. One thing I didn't realise, because I just went around and kind of just knocked the box off, got the cookie or whatever, but you can be obedient and kind of nice, well behaved, but you can also be really kind of mischievous, and you unlock a trophy for that as well, I believe. You can go in a mirror, pull silly faces, you can go into the parents' bedroom, mess about with the makeup, you can do a pretend call, you can do some drawings. You can just watch TV, you can hug the mum. There's a lot you can do. I actually missed a lot of this, or I think you might only be able to do certain things, but there's actually quite a little bit of replay ability value in this episode. But yeah, really interesting. And back to the parents, I do think it is really interesting seeing the fact that they're not on the same wavelength, the both parents. The mum is clearly this really sweet angel who wants to look out for you. She's scared you'll get cold outside. She's obviously really concerned about you, wants to protect you. But I think the dad looks at you a bit like a lost cause in a way. And he kind of just sort of thinks, this isn't our kid. There's clearly something wrong with her. I want her gone, kind of thing. And I didn't again, like you mentioned, he tries to hit you. Really cool that Aiden defends you and scares him, because he definitely looked like he pooped himself a little bit. But yeah, a really interesting chapter to go back and kind of to the backstory of Jodie. But yeah, no, get on for calling it, mate. She is indeed a foster child.
Similar to the motorbike in the Hunted as well. I quite liked, because obviously the snowball fight outside. Obviously, my mind instantly went to Until Dawn with Mike and Jess, right? But obviously, this game came out in 2013, so actually this come first before the Until Dawn snow fight. But what I quite liked about this is that you could actually move Jodie about, couldn't you? It's not like you was watching a cutscene with QTEs popping up in order to throw the snowballs. You could actually physically move her about in the environment and throw the snowballs. And there's just something about Quantic Dream and the snow, because they did it in Detroit Become Human as well. I think it was when they were by the carousel, I think. I'm convinced that was a snowy area with Kara and Luther and what have you. They just sell it so well. Even the walking mechanics that I noticed with Jodie, her walking changed, because as she's wading through the snow, she's almost dropping down on one shoulder a little bit more, because it's naturally more difficult to walk through. And it's these little things that I was picking up, I was watching, and just it's just the effort, and I've said this so many times, but it's just the attention to detail that Quantic Dream that put into their games that I absolutely adore. But yeah, I did want to bring up that snow fight, because naturally, I was drawing comparisons with Until Dawn, and I thought that the way that they presented it was equally as good.
Yeah, very, very strong scene. And yeah, it is really fun to just go around and have a snowball fight. I would have, my criticism is I wish it went on for a bit longer, because I was having so much fun pelting, snowballs in faces of everyone. It's really cool. You get covered behind the car, you go around, you actually get to do a snowball fight, because that was really fond memories of doing that as a kid. So it was really fun to kind of revisit that. So yeah, really hats off to Quantic Dream, and to kind of echo what you said as well. One other thing that Quantic Dream do really good is just they're just masters of sound design, and kind of getting the songs to kind of blend the scenes really well. They really invoke emotions, but also I feel if you were blindfolded playing this game, and you only heard that soundtrack, you would just probably have a gut feeling that you knew the chapter at that point was taking place outside in cold weather. They just have this ability to kind of capture the scene and the environment through music so well that I very much appreciate it. But yeah, obviously this whole kind of snowball fight ends in the fact that this one kid goes a bit too far and tries choking you with snow, smearing it in your face. And Aiden, who clearly, as you've gathered, mate, doesn't take too kindly to people going after Jodie. So what did you make of this Aiden absolutely going to strangle this kid?
I mean, obviously it shows like the potential of the entity, which we will get into in the next chapter. But I think naturally with Aiden, maybe it's because he has a name, maybe it's because it's almost part of Jodie that I think we're a bit more lenient. But equally, I feel like in that sort of situation, he comes in very handy, just like he did in the party as well. It's sort of helpful for, you know, teaching people a lesson a little bit, giving them a fair warning, as if to say, look, don't bully Jodie, because otherwise you're gonna get some, you know. So interesting to see where that potentially goes. Will Aiden, because she was born with it, will Aiden always be part of Jodie, or can he be lost to, you know, like the rift that we're about to talk about in the condenser? But we'll have to see. But I feel like with Aiden, it lends to more interesting gameplay. It's almost because he's not human and because he's like this spirit that's can just float around at will and do all this like crazy stuff, that it's sort of that impulse to sort of cause a bit of chaos and to mess things up a little bit is really strong. So I feel like I'd have a lot of fun with it, even like in future playthroughs as well.
Like honestly, it would have been really cool if like we played it multiplayer, where like maybe I was Jodie and you could play as Aiden, you know. And like I definitely get why there is this whole multiplayer dynamic, which we might overlook on this channel because we're only looking at it like a single player perspective, but we will neglect to mention the multiplayer factor. But I imagine, yeah, again, probably real fun when you consider it that way as well. But yeah, obviously, you know, the parents yell at you. We kind of touched on that already. You're sent to your room. You've got to go to bed. What did you make of this whole scene, lad, of like the mum saying monsters don't exist, but then clearly there are monsters to some design, because Jodie wakes up with a bunch of scratches when she screams in the night, lad?
Yeah, this was a bit of a curveball. I've written down here, it's almost like poltergeists are in Jodie's room. Like even with like the little toy with like the spooky red eyes at the beginning, you know. You sat there and you're thinking, how does this tie with everything else? I'm not actually too sure on that front, mate. I feel like maybe I have to see a little bit more of the game and sort of start to pull certain things together. But you know what? Before I forget, there is one more thing I wanted to bring up on this particular chapter, and that's the downstairs layout. Now, I could be wrong on this front, but it just reminded me of that house in Detroit Become Human. You know when Kara and Luther and Alex,
the moment you mentioned Detroit Become Human, yeah, my mind went there as well. You're not wrong.
when they're going to Canada, it's almost as if, because I think in Detroit Become Human, you're positioned in the kitchen looking at the living room, right? But I think in this game, we come downstairs and we start in the living room and we're looking at the kitchen. But it's interesting because it's the first thing I thought. I was like, it feels like the exact same layout as that house in Detroit Become Human. I just don't know if that was something you picked up as well.
I didn't, but now you mention it, I definitely see it. Especially, that downstairs area, the living room. No, you very true, lad. Well, really astute by you.
And you know what, mate? Actually, while we're talking about the downstairs, there was one particular choice that actually in that end screen was of interest to me. And it was to do with the garage. So you know when you play as Jodie and you go to get the cooking oil, and it seems a little bit off down there. It feels almost like a little bit of a horror sequence, that particular bit. It said at the end that presumably you can run out of time down there and you can get locked in. So did you know a little bit more about that you could sort of inform me on?
So I've never been locked in there, so I will admit I had to look it up to find out what happened. I will also say it did remind me a little bit of the Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, where you have to go up against that boiler, where you're in the dark, and like the kid's obviously a little scared of it. But yeah, supposedly if you take too long in there, which I didn't, I got the cooking oil and just bounced, but if you take too long in there, the door will lock behind you. Jodie gets scared in the dark, she'll scream. And bless the mum, she's actually a really sweet character. She'll run and kind of protect you, and she'll say grown-ups get scared as well. But she also sort of says, like, you know, an adults can imagine things too. So it's almost like maybe the mum discredits, you know, Jodie's belief in the fact that there's Aiden and stuff as well. So like a nice little scene, bonus scene, but it's one I didn't get, unfortunately. So lad, final chapter we're going to talk about in this episode is none other than the condenser. Now, very different tone, right, from the other chapters. We've had CIA combat training, we have had chase scenes. This, lad, is the horror chapter of the game. It's fairly spooky. I don't think there's any other chapters which really come close to it in terms of fear. So yeah, we've just kind of like randomly got a horror chapter in here. Really interesting. It starts off at the lab where Dawkins wakes you up, says that, oh, we've opened the passage, a lot's gone wrong, we need you to go and close it. And then you end up going there, and then you get to this like the DPA facility, and you just see all these bodies scattered everywhere, and ambulances and cops and stuff. Cole really is reluctant to send you in there, saying she's just a kid, but you're like, no, I'll go and do it. So yeah, Jodie goes into this solo building where a lot can happen. Before I kind of get into the ins and outs of it, lad, what did you make of it, and the fact that we're getting a horror chapter in this game?
I liked it again. Some of the things that stood out to me, I think that this entity thing is really, really cool. I feel like in two ways, like in the use of Aiden, but also the villains. So like, speaking of that, the use of Aiden, obviously we've talked about already how like you can cause chaos with him and have a bit of fun, right? But what I noticed in this chapter is that it's almost they started to introduce the puzzle element to it. So like there's instances where like you use Aiden to like knock the case out of the way so that the lift door shuts so that you can ultimately use the lift. There's times where you got to knock things over, where you can open the hatch. There's another time as well where you've got to like knock a fire extinguisher, so then Jodie can pick it up to then put a fire out so that she can progress forward. So like just from a gameplay point of view, I really like actually how diverse Aiden's use is. But then coming onto the horror thing with like the evil entity is what I'll call it at this point. It was just really cool. Like obviously you've got like the dock fight, how like the eyes just go white when like the entity has taken possession of them. But even how like the dead bodies get off the floor. Like you've got that sequence, haven't you, where you've got the key card and you've got to get through this door, and all these bodies just like come up from the floor. Like I don't know how to describe it, but they just don't like. It's almost like they don't need their joints to get up. They just naturally rise up off the floor, and it's all like a semi-zombie sequence, which I really wasn't expecting. And I feel like it's what you were saying before, mate, is that similar to Detroit Become Human, funnily enough, is that there's almost like there's like lots of little genres within the game, so you each have a different flavour in like each like different chapter, and this one was 100% the horror, so I wasn't necessarily expecting this whatsoever. So again, like really surprising. I feel like the horror was strong. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say, mate. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Especially like because, as I mentioned, whether it's the flaw or whether you like it, there's a lot of flavors in this, and maybe the game lacks an identity more so than a Detroit Become Human or a Heavy Rain will. But there probably will be people out there that love that style change, and if you're not a fan of one flavor, you'll probably be a fan of another. So I kind of get the system. But this one really interesting because, as we've mentioned as well, we just got off of playing a light-hearted kid tried to kill us, but will choke us out. But like, we just played a snowball fight, right? And then like 20 minutes later, we're getting chased by these really they're kind of like zombie entities, aren't they? But they're really creepy. That there's something quite jarring and unsettling about the way like their heads would almost like spasm glitch, right, as they're kind of like getting up, like really fast jerking movements, and that kind of like I just felt was like really, it made me uneasy anyway. And then the fact that like Jodie, you have to remember, like she's not joined like the CIA yet, right? She is still a teen at this point. So there's this teen that's in there all alone against these zombie entities that no one really knew that much about. And suddenly there's 10 of them. Luckily, though, we do have an Aiden, and it was fun just slingshotting them down and just like absolutely knocking them. It seems like there's all these entities in there, but it looks like we've got like a fairly strong one in our corner, which is really cool. So it's a nice little battle, and then you had that like thing as well in there, which you can kind of like channel the dead bodies to learn about how they died and like what is going on, which I thought was like another interesting little layer, which was cool. You'd find a dead body on the floor, and then you can kind of like find out how did this dead body get into this situation. And then, you know, like you mentioned as well, you can use it to learn stuff about like how the fact that someone dropped a fire extinguisher to a certain spot to kind of do that. So there was a bit of, like you mentioned, a puzzle solving element as well. You had that fight against that one guy, and it's like the most intense fight, not the one where you're against the 10 people, but where you're against the one, and it's like a fairly brutal fight scene where you've got to be good at like that fight mechanic, which I do find tricky in certain aspects. One little Easter egg for you, mate, is that the European version of the game has a slightly different setup where apparently in all the other games, like there's a point where I can't remember, I think I had this, I can't remember, but you impale the guy through the throat, and then the guy can just dislodge it from his throat. Apparently the European version of the game doesn't have that, but that version's the more flawed one because like he'll be seen with like a scar in his neck afterwards anyway. So just a little interesting thing to note that like, yeah, different sort of continent versions of this game get different sort of like a slightly different fight scene there. But still though, that fight scene though, I found it really unsettling and like cool though, because it's like there's this clear entity like going after you as a teen. So it was unsettling, but it felt really rewarding to get through that. I don't know if you felt the same, mate.
Also the fact as well, like how this guy was clearly someone that was trapped in there, you know, a survivor, and he's like, oh, you know, and you literally sort of show him, you know, head to the exit that way, and he just runs past your shoulder, and then you just see, like you say, like you see the body spasm, don't you? And then next thing you know, he's clearly possessed by this entity thing. Which I find interesting, which I mean, I imagine that Jodie can't be possessed because she's already got some form of entity with her, right? That was something that was on my mind because obviously she walked through the environment pretty much unscathed, but it seems that everybody else can just absolutely either become possessed or get launched across the room by this entity thing, which, you know, was really cool in the flashbacks. But yeah, like honestly, like the fight scene, I mean, from what I can recall, it's the first fight scene that we've had in the game, barring the combat training. And yeah, it was a pretty good one, mate.
Quite like about it as well is that she's clearly more panicked, you know, because of course she wouldn't have had her CIA training yet. It would have probably felt off if you were just a confident fighter in this scene. So I think they had the perfect dynamic of going for a fight scene which happens chronologically before the training, but afterwards in this timeline, so you know the controls. But because Quantic Dreams are just masters of it, like they still find a way to make it where she's panicked and you're actively trying to run away, and it feels more like self-defense than it does a fight scene, which I think was really clever. So yeah, no, I completely agree with that one, mate. But we get to the very end of the chapter where you go to the portal room and you find out that you can't like press the button. You've got to go through the inferno of like entities to get to the other side, which is up all these ladders and stuff. Mate, what did you make of this absolute scene of all these like entities like dancing around this room and having to run through them?
Yeah, I feel like, how did I describe it? I've written it down here. It's almost, there's times they was like piranha-like piranhas of the air sort of thing. But I've also said that it's almost like if like the robot things out of the Matrix and the Dementors from Harry Potter had a baby, this is what they would produce. Like that's what I sort of garnered from it. But yeah, things that I took from this, a hell of a lot of ladders. I was thinking to myself, okay, so once she closes the rift, what's the issue then? Because they're then trapped on the other side, but obviously this is going to be addressed later on, I should imagine. And again, I will sort of say that maybe this is on me, but I wasn't necessarily paying attention how early in the timeline this was. So for all I know, this could be relatively near the end equally it might be towards the beginning. So I'm like, okay, so surely these entities are going to come back in some way. Maybe someone opens the rift again and they all come through. But yeah, I feel like it was very tense. Music was cool. Again, with like the shaky cam. The QTEs, I still would say, look on the difficult side. I'm thinking particularly in that bit when you're like hanging in the middle and like all the entities are like trying to attack you, and I think you've got to like use the orb things, like, you know, when you're as Aiden, and I think you've like got to draw the orb things together to almost like push the entity away from you or extinguish it or whatever. So in terms of the eyes, like the eyes had to do a hell of a lot in that scene, which sure it was engaging, but I imagine as a first time out it might have been pretty difficult for players.
I was pretty happy that I succeeded it, because you can actually fail this whole scene, which is interesting. But yeah, like I think the thing as well is that you play as Jodie and you have to do the dodges, but then you have to play as Aiden and you have to go on the offense. So there's this interesting QT dynamic of offense and defense, and you have to be good at both to pass. So that was like really interesting, and I remember I was like quite frustrated in the sense that I don't always find it the clearest when you're Aiden of what you need to do, because it's not color coded, it doesn't really tell you. Sometimes you have to pull your mouse back, let go, and like fling the entities. Sometimes you have to drag it close together, so like you almost like strangling them. So it's not too clear to me on what needs doing. So sometimes you have to trial and error a little bit until your mouse sort of complies as to what you should be doing, and sometimes it doesn't give you enough time to kind of lock in and register that. Luckily though, I managed to pass it, and then I managed to close the rift. You can fail it, not much happens really. I think like the building explodes and then like Jodie comes out alive, and then Dawkins is like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have sent you in there. So it is a little bit of a nothing choice. Whether that has like a bearing on her mental health and state in like later chapters, I'm a little unsure, so someone in the comments might have to fill me in on that one. But yeah, like luckily for me, I succeeded it. And there is a little sort of scare at the end where like Jodie's left in complete silence, and for a brief moment she calls out Aiden's name, and it almost there's almost like a little gut feeling that maybe Aiden's been sucked into the entity, into the rift that you shut. I just wanted to ask you, like, was there any part of you was like, oh my god, have we lost Aiden here? Did you think that could have been a possibility?
I thought there was, yeah, I really did. Because I feel like when she loses Aiden, and who's to say that this may well come back up again later on in the game, I'd actually probably say that there's a strong likelihood. But it then leaves Jodie a lot more vulnerable, and I feel like that would actually make things a lot more interesting. Maybe the gameplay would suffer, because you've not got that chaotic sort of sidekick in Aiden that you can then go and do stuff with. But story-wise, it may well bring something else out, and it could actually really up the stakes in terms of the jeopardy. So yeah, there was a minute where I thought, yeah, Aiden's gone here. But obviously he was just, you know, messing around with her, you know, he was still sticking with her.
No, he was indeed. But yeah, no, very well. Anything else to mention on the condenser, lad, before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so, mate. Happy to wrap it up there.
Guys, that is the end of the analysis. So if you enjoyed that, leave a like and subscribe. Join us next week when we cover part 3 of the analysis, where we'll actually be looking at my favourite chapter, Homeless. But until then, guys, we will see you in the next one.
Catch you later.